Alex's cologne lingered in the air long after he'd left our apartment, our home, for the last time. I sat motionless on the edge of our bed, his side already stripped bare, staring at the half-empty closet where designer suits worth more than my monthly salary had hung just hours ago. The message on my phone glowed with cruel finality. I deserve someone who understands my world. Clara gets me in ways you never could. 10 years together, gone, in a text message. I picked up the framed photo from our nightstand. Alex in his tailored Armani at last year's charity gala, his arm around my waist, my navy department store dress suddenly looking shabby through my tears. The woman who'd replaced me had been in that photo too, standing just out of frame, her red Valentino gown and effortless confidence making her impossible to ignore even then. Before we jump back, and tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Clara Hudson, my best friend since college, the woman who'd held my hair back when I was sick, who'd helped me pick out the engagement ring I'd foolishly hoped Alex would someday slip onto my finger, who'd listened to me pour my heart out about my dreams of building a life with him. She'd nodded and smiled and offered advice while systematically dismantling everything I'd built from the inside. The apartment felt cavernous now, every corner echoing with conversations that would never happen again. The kitchen island where we'd shared morning coffee and Sunday crosswords. The living room where we'd argued about whose turn it was to pick the movie. The bathroom mirror where I'd practiced saying yes to a proposal that never came. My phone buzzed against the nightstand. For one desperate moment, my heart lurched. Maybe Alex had realized his mistake. Maybe he was coming back to explain, to apologize, to live. Are you okay? I just heard Maggie's voice carried through the screen, weighted with genuine concern. My oldest friend since freshman year, the only person who'd warned me about the lingering glances between Alex and Clara at dinner parties, the only one who'd seen through Clara's perfectly crafted facade. I stared at the message for a long moment. Before typing back, "He's gone. Mags packed his things while I was at work, left his keys and a text message." The response came immediately. "That absolute bastard. Where are you? I'm coming over." An hour later, Maggie sat across from me at the kitchen island, pouring generous glasses of the expensive wine Alex had been saving for a special occasion. Her dark curls were still damp from the rain outside, her makeup-free face fierce with loyalty. 10 years, I whispered, staring into the deep red liquid. And he couldn't even end it face to face. Because he's a coward, Maggie said flatly, reaching across to grasp my hand. A pathetic, social climbing coward who's about to discover exactly what he's lost. I laughed bitterly. What he's lost, Maggie? He's traded up. Everyone knows it. The nonprofit program manager dating the investment firm's junior partner was charming back when we were both starting out, but now. I gestured around at my modestly furnished apartment. Alex is a senior partner at Morrison and Associates, and Clara is the daughter of Hudson Development's founder. She can offer him the world I never could. So that's it? Maggie's eyes narrowed. You're just going to let him walk away after 10 years? After everything you've done for him? The words hit like precision strikes, each one landing with devastating accuracy. Who proofread every one of his presentations when he was too nervous to trust himself? Who networked with the partners' wives when he was too awkward to make small talk? Who postponed her own career advancement to relocate 3 times for his promotions? I stared into my untouched wine, each accusation resonating with a truth I'd been too blind to see. The late nights I'd spent helping him prepare for client meetings, the social events where I'd charmed potential investors while he closed deals, the dreams I'd quietly shelved to support his ambitions, telling myself that when he succeeded, we'd both benefit. It doesn't matter anymore, I finally said, my voice hollow. Alex made his choice. Maggie slammed her glass down with surprising force. You know what matters? That presentation he's giving to the Morrison board next week, the one you stayed up until 3 a.m. helping him rehearse. The Grandview Resort acquisition that you basically outlined the strategy for. The fact that half of Morrison and Associates thinks he's a genius because you've been his uncredited ghostwriter for a decade. I flinched. The Grandview Resort deal, Alex's crowning achievement, the acquisition that had finally put him in the same boardroom as Clara Hudson on a regular basis. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd helped architect my own replacement. What's your point, Maggie? That I helped build my own replacement? My point is that Alex Evans isn't half the business. Genius. Everyone thinks he is. The coldness in her voice finally cut through my numbness. And maybe it's time they all learned that. I should have shut down the conversation there. Should have thanked her for the wine and the sympathy and sent her home. That's what the old Olivia would have done, the supportive girlfriend, the team player, the woman who'd spent 10 years helping a man achieve his dreams while quietly burying her own. Instead, I took my first sip of Alex's prized Bordeaux and said, "I'm listening." Maggie leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "First, we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. What do you know about Clara Hudson? Beyond the obvious?" I shrugged, the wine beginning to warm my empty stomach. Harvard Business School, family money. Her father founded Hudson Development. She's been fast-tracked since joining 3 years ago. Everyone treats her like she walks on water. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. That's the public profile. But people like that always have secrets. Maggie pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the screen. My cousin Marcus works in commercial real estate journalism. He's been tracking the Hudson family for years. There are rumors that not all of their fortune was built through, shall we say, strictly ethical practices. I frowned. Even if that's true, what does it have to do with me? Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. Maggie's smile was sharp. The point is, knowledge is power, and right now, you need every advantage you can get. Something cold and unfamiliar unfurled in my chest, a sensation I'd never allowed myself to feel before. 10 years of supporting, accommodating, understanding. 10 years of shrinking myself to fit into Alex's world, of celebrating his victories while mourning my own abandoned dreams. And for what? I need to know everything, I said quietly, about both of them. Maggie's smile widened. Now you're thinking clearly. But first things first, you need to secure yourself financially. Joint accounts, credit cards, investments. What's the situation? The question snapped me back to practical reality. We have a joint checking account for household expenses, but most of our savings are in separate accounts. I'm still on our shared credit card, the one with the travel points. I paused, thinking. His name is on the apartment lease, but I've made every payment for the past 3 years. Digital files, cloud accounts, email. I blinked. We share a cloud drive for household documents, and I know all his passwords. I set them up. A small, humorless laugh escaped me. He could never remember them. Good. That's very good. Maggie reached for her purse, pulling out a sleek laptop. Let's start there. Every email, every document, every financial record. If it's in a shared digital space, we need to archive it now, before he remembers to change the passwords. As Maggie's fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing years of our shared digital life, I felt something shift inside me. The hollow ache was still there, but underneath it, something harder was crystallizing. I'd spent 10 years being the woman behind the man, the support system that enabled his success, while my own potential withered. Maybe it was time to discover what Olivia Cooper could accomplish when she stopped pouring all her energy into someone else's dreams. Wait, I said, a memory surfacing like a bubble breaking through dark water. There's something else. The venue. Maggie looked up from the laptop screen. What venue? For their wedding. Clara mentioned it when she called to explain herself. I could barely keep the venom from my voice. The Meridian Estate. She made sure to tell me how perfect it was, how it was exactly what she'd always dreamed of for her special day. The irony twisted in my stomach like a knife. The Meridian Estate, the same venue Alex and I had toured to years ago when I'd still believed in our future. The same venue where I'd squeezed his hand and whispered about how perfect it would be for our wedding someday. The same venue where he'd nodded and smiled and made non-committal noises about when the time was right. How do you know about the Meridian Estate? Maggie asked, her voice carefully neutral. Heat flooded my cheeks. Alex and I looked at it. Before, when I thought, I trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. When you thought you had a future together, Maggie finished gently. Oh, Liv. The sympathy in her voice almost broke me. She chose it on purpose, I whispered. Clara knew we'd looked at it. She knew what it meant to me, and she chose it anyway. For a moment, the only sound was the rain pattering against the windows and the soft clicking of Maggie's typing. Then she spoke, her voice deadly quiet. What if she couldn't have it? I looked up sharply. What do you mean? I mean, what? If the perfect venue for her perfect wedding suddenly became unavailable? What if the fairy tale she's so carefully constructed came crashing down around her designer heels? My heart began to beat faster. That's impossible. The Meridian estate is booked solid. They'd never cancel a reservation, especially not this close to the date. They would if someone made them a better offer. Maggie's eyes were bright with possibility. What if someone with deeper pockets and better connections decided they wanted that exact date for their own event? You're talking about buying out their wedding, I said slowly. That's crazy, is it? Maggie challenged. You have the legal background to navigate contracts and negotiations. You have the financial resources from your separate savings account. And thanks to your networking with Alex's colleagues' wives, you have connections in the luxury event industry. My mind raced, pieces clicking into place with frightening clarity. I'd need to act fast. Their wedding is in 6 weeks. Then, we better get started. Maggie's smile was predatory. Time to show Clara Hudson what happens when you steal someone's dreams. As she turned back to the laptop, pulling up the Meridian Estate's contact information, I felt the last vestiges of the old Olivia, the accommodating, self-sacrificing Olivia, slip away like a shed skin. In her place, something sharper and more dangerous was emerging. Alex and Clara had taken everything from me: my partner, my best friend, my future, even my dreams. They'd stripped away my identity so thoroughly that I'd forgotten who I was beneath the role of supportive girlfriend. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated exactly what I was capable of when I stopped trying to be the woman they wanted me to be and started being the woman I truly was. The woman who'd graduated top of her class from law school before Alex convinced her to take a temporary step back from her career. The woman who'd built a network of influential contacts while pretending to be just another corporate wife. The woman who'd quietly accumulated substantial savings while Alex spent freely, assuming she'd always be there to catch him if he fell. They'd discarded me like I was nothing. Now it was time to show them exactly what nothing could do. I reached for my phone, my fingers steady as I dialed the number Maggie had found. Meridian Estate? This is Olivia Cooper. I'd like to discuss booking your venue for a private event. Yes, I know you're typically booked solid, but I think you'll find my offer compelling. The wine coursed through my veins like liquid courage as I began to outline my requirements. 6 weeks might not be enough time to heal from their betrayal, but it was more than enough time to ensure they'd never forget the woman they'd thrown away. After all, they'd taught me that sometimes the best revenge wasn't getting mad, it was getting even. The Reclamation, Part 2, The Turning Point. Olivia finds her strength. The call to Meridian Estate had lasted exactly 14 minutes. 14 minutes to plant the seed that would uproot Alex and Claire's perfect fairy tale. The conversation played on repeat in my mind as I stared at the rain streaking down my apartment window, the city lights blurring into abstract impressions of the life I was about to reclaim. Miss Cooper, the venue coordinator had said, her voice professionally warm, I'm afraid we're completely booked for the next 18 months. However, given your unique circumstances and generous offer, perhaps we could arrange a consultation. Unique circumstances. I'd been deliberately vague, mentioning only that I represented a client interested in hosting a significant corporate event, one that required absolute privacy and exclusivity. The kind of event that could command premium pricing and generate the sort of publicity the Meridian Estate craved. 3 weeks had passed since that initial call. 3 weeks of what looked like healing to the outside world, but was actually careful, methodical planning. I'd returned to work at Patterson and Associates, the boutique law firm where I'd been a rising star before Alex convinced me to take a temporary step back to support his career. My colleagues welcomed me with careful sympathy, unaware that their former colleague had transformed into something far more dangerous than a heartbroken woman seeking solace in work. You look different, Emily Dawson, my former boss and the firm's managing partner, observed as she settled into the chair across from my desk. Stronger. I glanced up from the contract. I'd been reviewing a complex acquisition deal that would have challenged me 6 months ago, but now felt almost elementary. Thank you for letting me come back, Emily. I know it's unconventional, given how abruptly I left. Olivia, you were one of our most promising associates. Your decision to focus on your personal life was disappointing, but understandable. Emily's sharp gaze missed nothing. I heard about Alex. I'm sorry. The sympathy felt strange now, like condolences for a person I used to be. It was for the best, I said simply. I'm ready to focus on what I do best, which is why I'm giving you the Morrison Industries acquisition. It's a complex deal, worth about 8 million. And the client specifically requested you. My pen stilled against the contract. Morrison Industries, Alex's firm's biggest competitor. The irony was almost too perfect. They requested me specifically? James Morrison himself. Apparently, he was impressed by your work on the Grandview Resort strategy. Emily's smile was knowing. Word gets around in this industry, Olivia. People know talent when they see it, even if it's been hidden behind someone else's shadow. Heat flushed through my chest, not embarrassment this time, but something fiercer. Recognition, validation. All those late nights I'd spent crafting Alex's presentations, all those strategies I'd developed while he took the credit, hadn't gone entirely unnoticed. I'll take it, I said, my voice steady. When do they want to meet? Tomorrow? 2 p.m. Emily stood, her expression thoughtful. Olivia, I don't know what happened in your personal life, and I won't pry. But whatever fire Alex's betrayal lit under you, don't let it burn out. This is the woman I hired 5 years ago. This is who you're meant to be. After Emily left, I sat in the gathering dusk of my office, the city sprawling below me like a constellation of possibilities. My phone buzzed a text from Maggie. Got the intel you requested. Clara's wedding dress fitting is tomorrow at p.m. Vera Wang, downtown. The venue coordinator called this morning. Your consultation is confirmed for Thursday. I typed back quickly. Perfect. Phase 1 begins tomorrow. The next morning, I dressed with the same careful precision I'd once reserved for Alex's important client dinners. But this time, the armor was for me. A charcoal Armani suit that fit like a second skin, heels that added 3 inches to my height, makeup applied with surgical precision. The woman in the mirror looked like she could negotiate billion-dollar deals or dismantle lives with equal skill. The Morrison Industries meeting was everything I'd hoped it would be. James Morrison, a silver-haired titan in his 60s, listened to my preliminary analysis with the focused attention of a man who recognized expertise when he heard it. Your reputation precedes you, Miss Cooper, he said as we concluded the initial consultation. I'll be honest, when we heard you were available again, we jumped at the chance. Alex Evans may have been the face of those Grandview strategies, but anyone with sense knew the real architect. The validation was intoxicating, but I kept my expression professionally neutral. I'm grateful for the opportunity, Mr. Morrison. When would you like the preliminary reports? 2 weeks? And Olivia? He paused at the conference room door. I heard about your situation. For what it's worth, his loss is our considerable gain. I spent the rest of the afternoon immersed in research, losing myself in the familiar rhythm of analysis and strategy. It felt like coming home to a part of myself I'd forgotten existed. By the time I checked my watch, it was nearly 5 p.m. Claire's dress fitting would be ending soon. I gathered my things and headed downtown, not to confront her, I wasn't ready for that yet, but simply to observe, to understand what I was truly up against. Vera Wang's boutique occupied a corner of the fashion district like a temple to matrimonial perfection. Through the wide windows, I could see Clara standing on a raised platform, surrounded by yards of ivory silk and a cluster of fawning attendants. Even from across the street, she looked radiant, her blonde hair swept into an elaborate updo, her figure perfect in the flowing gown. She also looked nervous. I watched as she turned this way and that, her smile not quite reaching her eyes as the seamstress pinned and adjusted. Every few moments, she'd check her phone, her expression growing more strained. Trouble in paradise? Maggie's voice came from beside me. I hadn't heard her approach, too focused on the drama unfolding behind the glass. She looks worried, I observed. She should be. Alex has been calling you, by the way, 15 times since yesterday. He's starting to panic about something. I pulled out my phone, noting the string of missed calls and increasingly desperate voicemails. Let him panic. What did you find out about their timeline? Wedding invitations went out last week. Save the dates were sent to months ago. They're locked into that venue for November 15th. And Claire's already put deposits down with half the vendors in the city. Maggie's smile was sharp. It would be very expensive and very embarrassing if something went wrong now. Good. I watched Clara step down from the platform, her movements tight with stress. The more invested they are, the harder the fall. Olivia, Maggie's voice carried a note of concern. Are you sure about this? Once you pull this trigger, there's no going back. Alex will know it was you. I considered the question seriously, watching Clara gather her things and head for the boutique's exit. 3 weeks ago, the thought of deliberately hurting Alex would have devastated me. Now, The prospect felt like justice. He destroyed 10 years of my life in a text message, I said quietly. He stole my best friend, my future, my dreams, and replaced me like I was nothing more than an outdated appliance. Yes, Maggie, I'm sure. Clara emerged from the boutique, her phone pressed to her ear, her free hand gesticulating frantically. Even from a distance, I could read the stress in her posture, the way she kept looking around as if expecting disaster to materialize from the shadows. Maybe she was more perceptive than I'd given her credit for. Thursday morning, I said, turning away from the window. I meet with the venue coordinator, and we finalize the details. And then Clara Hudson learns what it feels like to have her perfect world ripped away by someone she underestimated. We walked back toward the parking garage in companionable silence, the city's evening energy washing over us like a tide. For the first time in weeks, I felt the stirrings of something that might have been happiness. Not the desperate, clinging happiness I'd felt with Alex, always tinged with the fear of losing him, but something deeper and more sustainable. The happiness of a woman who'd stopped waiting for someone else to give her permission to be extraordinary. My phone rang as we reached Maggie's car. Alex's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment, I hesitated. Then I answered, Olivia, thank God. His voice was tight with strain. We need to talk, do we? I kept my tone neutral, professional. I thought you'd said everything you needed to say. This is about the Morrison deal. I know you're working with them. Of course he knew. The business community in our city was smaller than people realized. And news of a major acquisition traveled fast. What about it? You can't do this, Liv. You know what that deal means to our firm. If Morrison Industries pulls their partnership with us, your firm, I corrected. Not our firm. I don't work for you anymore, Alex. I never really did. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken accusations and the weight of burned bridges. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted to the charming, persuasive tone that had once made me melt. Liv, I know you're hurt. I know I handled things badly. But this is beneath you. This isn't who you are. You're right, I said, watching the city lights reflect off the windshield of Maggie's car. This isn't who I was. But the woman you knew, the woman who would have rolled over and accepted your betrayal, she's gone, Alex. You killed her. Olivia, I ended the call and turned off my phone. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to reclaim the power I'd given away so freely. But tonight, for the first time in months, I was going to sleep without crying. After all, it's hard to mourn the death of a woman you never really wanted to be in the first place. Part 3. Planning the heist. Olivia's strategy. The Meridian estate looked even more magnificent in the cold morning light than it had 2 years ago when Alex and I had toured it with stars in our eyes and plans for a future that would never come. The limestone facade gleamed like old money, its Gothic revival architecture. Speaking of permanence and tradition, everything Clara Hudson believed she deserved. I sat in my car for a moment, gathering my thoughts and adjusting the navy blazer I'd chosen specifically for this meeting. Professional but not intimidating, successful but not ostentatious. The kind of outfit worn by someone with serious money, who didn't need to prove it. Charlotte Jensen was waiting for me in the estate's opulent lobby, her silver hair styled in an elegant chignon, her smile warm but assessing. As the venue's lead coordinator, she'd built her reputation on discretion and delivering impossible dreams for clients with unlimited budgets. Miss Cooper, she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. So wonderful to meet you in person. Shall we discuss your vision? We settled into leather chairs in her private office, surrounded by photographs of wedding cakes that cost more than most people's cars and floral arrangements that looked like botanical gardens had been transplanted whole. Charlotte poured coffee from an antique silver service while I arranged my materials with deliberate care. As I mentioned on the phone, I began, my client is planning a very exclusive corporate retreat, the kind of event that requires absolute privacy and impeccable service. Of course, we specialize in high-profile events that demand discretion. Charlotte's eyes held the calculating gleam of someone mentally adding zeros to her commission. What time frame are we considering? November 15th. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Charlotte's smile faltered almost imperceptibly, before snapping back into place. Oh, I'm afraid that particular date is unavailable. We have a wedding scheduled, the Hudson Evans wedding, I said smoothly. Yes, I'm aware. That's precisely why my client is interested in that specific date. Charlotte's coffee cup passed halfway to her lips. In the silence, I could hear the grandfather clock in the corner marking seconds like a countdown. I'm not sure. I understand. I leaned forward slightly, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. My client has reason to believe that particular event might experience complications. She'd prefer to have a backup plan in place, should the original booking become, shall we say, problematic. Miss Cooper, I have to say, this is highly irregular. We pride ourselves on honoring our commitments to clients. Of course. And I'm not suggesting you breach any contracts. I reached into my briefcase and withdrew a folder containing preliminary financial projections, all completely fabricated but professionally presented. I'm simply proposing that you consider a more lucrative arrangement. Charlotte opened the folder, her eyebrows rising as she scanned the numbers. The retreat I'd invented was worth 3 times what Clara and Alex were paying, with additional corporate partnerships that could generate years of future bookings. This is substantial, she admitted. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My client values perfection, Miss Jensen. She's willing to pay for it. I paused, letting the implications settle. Of course, she'd need assurance that the venue would be available when she needs it. What exactly are you proposing? A priority booking agreement. If the current November 15th reservation experiences any difficulties, my client would be prepared to step in immediately. Think of it as insurance against lost revenue. Charlotte's professional mask was slipping, revealing the sharp businesswoman beneath. And if the Hudson Evans wedding proceeds as planned, then you've lost nothing but a few hours of paperwork. But Charlotte, may I call you Charlotte? In your experience, how often do elaborate society weddings proceed without complications? The question hung between us, loaded with possibility. I'd done my research on Charlotte Jensen's career, knew about the high-profile cancellations she'd weathered, the Bridezillas who'd imploded spectacularly, the society scandals that had left her scrambling to minimize damage to the estate's reputation. What kind of complications are you anticipating? She asked carefully. The kind that tend to arise when relationships are built on shaky foundations. I closed the folder and sat back. I'm not suggesting anything untoward, Charlotte. I'm simply proposing a mutually beneficial arrangement that protects both of our interests. She was quiet for a long moment, staring out the tall windows at the estate's manicured gardens where Clara had planned to take her wedding photos. When she spoke, her voice was businesslike again. I'd need to see proof of funds, a substantial deposit to hold the alternate date. Naturally, I pulled out a certified bank statement reel this time, representing the bulk of my carefully hoarded savings account. 25% now, the remainder upon execution. Charlotte's eyes widened at the figure. It represented nearly everything I'd saved over 10 years of careful financial planning, money I'd intended to use for the down payment on the house Alex and I would never buy. This is significant, Miss Cooper. Are you certain your client is prepared to commit these resources? My client is prepared to invest in perfection, I said evenly. The question is whether the Meridian estate is prepared to provide it. She was already reaching for her contract templates, her decision made by the numbers on the page. I'll need 48 hours to prepare the documentation. There are legal considerations when dealing with alternate bookings. Of course, I'll expect your call by Friday afternoon. As I gathered my materials, Charlotte spoke again, her voice carefully neutral. Miss Cooper, may I ask, do you know the Hudson Evans wedding party personally? I paused at the door, considering how much truth to reveal. You could say I have a vested interest in seeing that particular event proceed smoothly. The drive back to my apartment gave me time to process what I'd just set in motion. In 48 hours, I'd either have a signed contract giving me the power to destroy Clara and Alex's wedding day, or I'd be out thousands of dollars with nothing to show for it but the satisfaction of having tried. My phone buzzed with a text from Maggie. How did it go? Phase 1 complete, I typed back. Phase 2 begins tomorrow. Because having a backup plan for their venue was only the beginning. If I was going to tear down the perfect life they'd built on the ruins of my happiness, I needed to understand every detail of their plans, every vulnerability in their carefully constructed facade. I spent the afternoon at my computer, using the investigative skills I'd honed during my law school years to map out Alex and Clara's wedding preparations. Social media provided a treasure trove of information. Clara's Instagram was a masterclass in performative happiness, each post carefully curated to project effortless perfection. The guest list was ambitious for such short notice. 200 of the city's most influential people, from old money society families to tech entrepreneurs. The catering was being handled by Le Bernardin's former executive chef. The flowers were being flown in from Ecuador. The photographer had shot celebrities and royalty. It was the wedding of Claire's dreams, designed to announce her arrival into the highest echelons of society. It was also exactly the kind of elaborate production that would be most devastated by unexpected complications. My laptop chimed with an incoming email from Charlotte Jensen. Miss Cooper, I've reviewed your proposal with our legal team. We're prepared to move forward with the priority booking agreement. Can you meet tomorrow morning to finalize the details? I stared at the screen for a long moment, my finger hovering over the reply button. Once I sent this email, once I signed that contract, there would be no pretending this was just fantasy, no backing down from the path I'd chosen. Alex's face flashed through my mind, not as he'd looked when he left me, cold and dismissive, but as he'd been that first night we'd toured the Meridian estate. The way he'd squeezed my hand when we'd stood in the main ballroom, the soft smile he'd given me when I'd whispered about how perfect it would be for our someday wedding. That Alex was gone, if he'd ever really existed at all. The man who'd left me for Clara. Hudson had no use for sentiment or shared dreams. He'd traded love for status, commitment for convenience, and our decade together for a woman who could elevate his social standing. I typed my response. Tomorrow morning works perfectly. I'll see you at 10. As I hit send, I felt something shift inside me, like a gear clicking into place in a complex machine. The old Olivia, the one who'd built her life around someone else's ambitions, was truly gone now. In her place was someone harder, more focused, more dangerous. Someone who understood that sometimes the most devastating revenge was simply giving people exactly what they deserved. The contract lay spread across my kitchen table like a map to enemy territory, each clause a carefully worded weapon. In the war I was about to wage, Charlotte Jensen had outdone herself. The priority booking agreement was a masterpiece of legal ambiguity, giving me the power to commandeer the Meridian estate while maintaining the veneer of legitimate business practice. Are you absolutely certain about this? Maggie asked, her finger tracing the signature line that would seal Clara and Alex's fate. Once you sign this, there's no taking it back. I uncapped my Mont Blanc pen, a gift from Alex on our 5th anniversary, now repurposed for his destruction. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. The signature flowed from the pen like liquid determination. Olivia M. Cooper. 10 letters that would transform me from victim to victor, from the woman who'd been discarded to the architect of consequence. My phone rang before the ink had dried. Charlotte's voice was crisp with professional satisfaction. Miss Cooper, I've received your signed documents. I wanted to personally confirm that your priority booking is now active. Should any complications arise with the November 15th reservation, we'll contact you immediately. And the timeline for such complications? Our standard cancellation policy requires 72 hours notice for full vendor coordination. Less than that, and we enter what I call crisis management mode. There was a pause, heavy with implication. I trust this information is useful for your planning purposes? Extremely useful. Thank you, Charlotte. After ending the call, I sat in the silence of my apartment, feeling the weight of what I'd just accomplished. In my hands lay the power to destroy the wedding that Clara had spent months planning, the fairy tale ending she'd stolen from me along with my partner and my future. But simply canceling their venue would be too crude, too obvious. Clara would know immediately that I was responsible, and while that held a certain appeal, it wouldn't achieve my true objective. I didn't want her to know I was coming until it was too late to stop me. What's next? Maggie asked, settling beside me on the couch with 2 glasses of wine, a better vintage than Alex had ever bought, purchased with my own money for my own celebration. Intelligence gathering. I pulled out the folder I'd been compiling over the past week, a comprehensive dossier on the Hudson Evans wedding that would have impressed a military strategist. I need to understand every detail of their plans, every vendor, every contingency. When I move against them, it needs to be surgical. The folder contained printouts of Clara's social media posts, vendor contracts I'd accessed through Alex's still-shared cloud drive, guest lists, timeline schedules, and financial records that painted a picture of a wedding designed to cement Clara's position in high society. "Look at this," I said, spreading the documents across the coffee table. "The catering alone costs more than most people's annual salary. The photographer charges more per hour than I made in my first job. This isn't just a wedding, it's Clara's debutante ball, her formal introduction to the life she believes she deserves." Maggie studied the papers with the focused attention of someone who understood the psychology of warfare. "She's overextended herself financially. Look at these payment schedules. She's put down deposits but hasn't paid final balances. If something disrupts the timeline, she'd be facing significant financial penalties," I finished. "Plus the humiliation of having to explain to 200 guests why the wedding of the century just became the cancellation of the year. But you still need a trigger, something that would force them to cancel without pointing directly to you." I leaned back against the couch, my mind racing through possibilities. What if the problem wasn't with the venue? What if the complication came from somewhere else entirely? "What do you mean?" "Alex's firm, Morrison and Associates. What if their biggest client had concerns about their key partner's judgment? What if questions arose about his professional conduct?" Maggie's eyes lit up with understanding. "The Morrison Industries deal. You could use your position to create doubt about Alex's reliability." "Not doubt," I corrected. "Evidence. Alex has been cutting corners for years, taking credit for work he didn't do, making promises he couldn't keep. I just need to document it properly." The next morning, I arrived at Patterson and Associates with the focused intensity of someone on a mission. The Morrison Industries acquisition had given me legitimate access to industry records, competitor analysis, and confidential financial data that could paint a very unflattering picture of Alex's business practices. "You're here early," Emily observed, finding me in the law library at 7 a.m., surrounded by commercial real estate contracts and corporate filings. "The Morrison deal is more complex than I initially thought," I said, which was true in ways Emily couldn't imagine. "I'm finding some interesting discrepancies in the market analysis." "What kind of discrepancies?" I pulled up a spreadsheet I'd been working on since dawn, a comparison of property valuations that highlighted significant irregularities in Alex's recent deals. "Look at the Grandview Resort acquisition. The valuation methods don't match industry standards, and the financing structure suggests either incompetence or deliberate manipulation." Emily studied the data, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "This is concerning. Have you verified these numbers?" "Multiple sources." "And Emily?" I met her gaze directly. "This isn't an isolated incident. I can document at least 6 similar irregularities over the past 2 years. Are you suggesting Alex Evans has been engaging in fraudulent practices?" "I'm suggesting that Morrison Industries deserves to know exactly who they're potentially partnering with." I closed the laptop, my expression carefully neutral. "What they do with that information is entirely up to them." Emily was quiet for a long moment, her legal mind processing the implications. "Olivia, I need to ask, is this about the Morrison deal, or is this personal?" The question hung between us like a challenge. I could have lied, could have maintained the pretense that this was purely professional. Instead, I chose honesty. "It's both," I said simply. "Alex Evans destroyed my personal life, but that doesn't change the fact that he's been cutting corners professionally for years. Morrison Industries has a right to know what kind of partner they're considering. And if this information damages Alex's reputation, affects his other business relationships, then perhaps he should have thought about that before he decided to build his career on other people's work." I gathered my files, my voice growing colder. "I'm not fabricating anything, Emily. I'm simply ensuring that the truth comes to light." That afternoon, I requested a meeting with James Morrison, ostensibly to present my preliminary findings on the acquisition. In reality, I was about to detonate a bomb that would crater Alex's professional reputation and, by extension, his personal life. "Miss Cooper," Morrison said as I entered his corner office, its windows offering a commanding view of the city skyline. "I understand you have concerns about some of our potential partnerships." "I do." I opened my presentation folder, each page a carefully crafted weapon. "During my research, I discovered some troubling patterns in the business practices of Morrison and Associates, specifically regarding their senior partner, Alex Evans. For the next 30 minutes, I laid out a comprehensive case against Alex's professional competence. The inflated valuations, the misrepresented market analysis, the deals structured to benefit his firm at the expense of clients. I presented it all with the clinical precision of a prosecutor delivering a closing argument. Morrison's expression grew increasingly grim as I spoke. "These are serious allegations, Miss Cooper. Do you have documentation to support them?" "Extensive documentation." I slid a bound report across his desk. "Financial records, email communications, expert witness statements from industry professionals. Everything you need to make an informed decision about your potential partnership. And you're bringing this to my attention because Morrison Industries deserves better than a partner who built his reputation on borrowed expertise and questionable ethics." I met his gaze steadily. "You have the right to know who you're doing business with." Morrison was quiet for several minutes, reviewing the evidence I'd compiled. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured but firm. "This changes things considerably. I'll need to discuss this with our board, but I suspect we'll be reevaluating our position regarding Morrison and Associates." "I understand. And Mr. Morrison? I'd appreciate it if this conversation remained confidential until you've made your decision." "Of course. Though I should warn you, if we decide to terminate our relationship with Morrison and Associates, Alex Evans will likely suspect you were involved." "Let him suspect," I said, standing to leave. "The truth has a way of surfacing eventually." The drive home felt like a victory lap through the city I was reclaiming as my own. Alex's professional reputation was about to crumble, taking with it the foundation of success he'd built on my uncredited work. More importantly, the scandal would create exactly the kind of crisis that might force him and Clara to reconsider their elaborate wedding plans. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at Caf Luna in 1 hour. Come alone." Clara stared at the message for a long moment, my pulse quickening. Clara wanted to meet, which meant she'd either discovered what I was planning or was beginning to suspect that her perfect life wasn't as secure as she'd believed. Either way, it was time for the conversation I'd been both dreading and anticipating. Since the night Alex walked out of my life, I typed back, "I'll be there." Caf Luna occupied a corner of the arts district, like a sanctuary for those who preferred their confrontations cushioned by artisanal coffee and the pretense of civilization. I arrived 15 minutes early, choosing a table near the back where we could speak without being overheard, and ordered a cappuccino I had no intention of drinking. Clara walked in exactly on time, her signature punctuality now feeling more like a calculated power play than a charming quirk. She'd dressed for battle in a cream-colored cashmere sweater and tailored pants that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her blonde hair swept into the kind of effortless chignon that required an hour and a professional stylist to achieve. She looked perfect, as always. She also looked terrified. "Olivia." She slid into the chair across from me, her movements carefully controlled. "Thank you for meeting me, Clara." I kept my voice neutral, observing the subtle signs of stress. That her makeup couldn't quite conceal the tension around her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the menu. "You look well." "Do I?" She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Because I feel like my entire world is falling apart, and I can't shake the feeling that you're somehow responsible." The accusation hung between us, bold and desperate. I sipped my cappuccino, using the moment to study the woman who had once been my closest friend, searching for any trace of the person I'd trusted with my deepest secrets and most vulnerable moments. "That's quite an accusation," I said finally. "What makes you think I have anything to do with your problems?" "Because they started the day after Alex told me you had spoken. Because Morrison Industries suddenly pulled out of their partnership discussions. Because I know you, Liv, and I know what you're capable of when you're angry." "You think you know me?" The words came out colder than I'd intended, years of suppressed resentment crystallizing into ice. "The woman you knew would have rolled over and accepted your betrayal. She would have cried into her wine and written sad poetry about lost friendship. That woman is gone, Clara. I never meant for it to happen this way." Clara's composure cracked, revealing the desperation beneath her perfect facade. "You have to believe that, Alex and I. It just happened. We tried to fight it. But stop." I held up a hand, cutting off her practiced speech. "Don't you dare try to romanticize what you did. You didn't fall in love, Clara. You saw an opportunity and you took it. Her mouth opened, then closed, like a fish gasping for water. That's not. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than shouting. You saw Alex's success, his connections, his potential to elevate your social status, and you decided you wanted it more than you valued our friendship. You calculated the cost of betraying me and decided it was worth paying. You're wrong. But her protest lacked conviction, her eyes darting away from mine. Alex and I have real feelings for each other. We're building something meaningful built on the foundation of my destroyed life. I sat back, studying her with the clinical detachment of a scientist observing a specimen. Tell me, Clara, when you're lying in bed next to him, do you ever think about the 10 years I invested in that relationship? Do you ever wonder if the man who could discard a decade of love in a text message might someday do the same to you? The color drained from her face. He loves me. What we have is different. Different how? Because you can offer him the social connections I couldn't? Because your father's company can advance his career in ways mine never could? I paused, watching her flinch at each word. Or is it different because you're not the type of woman who would sacrifice her own ambitions to support his? I never asked you to do that, Clara whispered. You chose to put his career first. You're right. I did choose that. Just like you chose to seduce my partner while pretending to be my friend. Just like Alex chose to replace me with someone who could better serve his ambitions. I stood up, gathering my purse. We all make choices, Clara. Now you get to live with yours. Wait, she reached across the table, her fingers brushing my wrist. Live, please. Whatever you're planning, I'm not planning anything. The lie came easily, smoothly. I'm simply living my life and pursuing my career. If that causes problems for you and Alex, well, perhaps you should have considered the consequences before you made your choices. The Morrison deal you had something to do with that, didn't you? I provided factual information to a client. What they chose to do with that information was their decision. I pulled my wrist free from her grasp. Though I have to ask if Alex's business practices can't withstand scrutiny. What does that say about the man you chose to marry? Clara's perfect composure finally shattered completely. You're trying to destroy us, our wedding, our future. Everything we've built. You destroyed that yourself the moment you decided my happiness was an acceptable sacrifice for your ambitions. I stood up, looking down at the woman who had once held such power over my life. I'm not destroying anything, Clara. I'm simply refusing to continue building your dreams at the expense of my own. Please, she whispered, tears threatening to ruin her carefully applied makeup. Can't we find a way to fix this? We were best friends, Liv. That has to count for something. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost remembered the late-night conversations we'd shared in college, the dreams we'd confessed, the promises we'd made to always support each other. Then I remembered the cold satisfaction in her voice when she'd called to tell me about the engagement, the casual cruelty with which she'd mentioned choosing the Meridian estate for their reception. We were best friends, I agreed. Past tense. The woman who was your friend is as gone as the woman who loved Alex. What's left is someone who understands that loyalty is earned, not expected, and that actions have consequences. I turned to leave, then paused, delivering one final blow. Enjoy your wedding planning, Clara. I hope it goes exactly as you deserve. As I walked out of the cafe, I could feel her staring after me, could sense the fear radiating from her. Like heat from a dying fire. She knew, somewhere in the depths of her calculating mind, that she'd underestimated me. That the woman she'd discarded so casually had emerged from the ashes of her old life, transformed into something far more dangerous than a heartbroken victim. My phone rang as I reached my car. Alex's name on the screen, right on schedule. What did you say to Clara? His voice was tight with barely controlled panic. She's hysterical. Talking about you destroying our lives. I told her the truth, I said calmly, starting the engine. Something you seem to have difficulty with lately. Olivia, whatever game you're playing, it needs to stop. The Morrison deal. Clara's paranoia. This isn't you. You're right, I said, pulling out of the parking space with deliberate care. This isn't the woman you knew. That woman was naive enough to believe that love and loyalty meant something. This woman understands that the only person you can count on is yourself. What do you want? Money? An apology? Tell me what it will take to end this. The desperation in his voice was intoxicating, a drug I'd never known I needed. What I want, Alex, is for you to understand what it feels like to have your carefully constructed life dismantled by someone you underestimated. What I want is for both of you to learn that actions have consequences, and that some betrayals can't be forgiven or forgotten. You're scaring Clara. She thinks you're going to try to ruin the wedding. I let the words hang in the air, savoring their weight. Such an important day for both of you. I do hope nothing goes wrong. I ended the call before he could respond, then immediately turned off my phone. Let them panic. Let them wonder what I was planning. Let them jump at shadows and second-guess every vendor, every arrangement, every detail of their perfect day. Because the truth was, I didn't need to actively destroy their wedding. I'd simply created the conditions for them to destroy it themselves through paranoia, through the stress of Alex's professional scandal, through the gradually dawning realization that their relationship was built on foundations as fragile as the lies they'd told themselves about their motivations. The weapon I'd forged wasn't revenge, it was truth. And sometimes truth was the most devastating weapon of all. The Morrison Industries scandal hit the financial news 3 days after my meeting with Clara, spreading through the business community like wildfire through dry timber. Alex's professional reputation didn't just crumble, it imploded with the spectacular devastation of a controlled demolition, taking Morrison and Associates' credibility down with it. I read the headlines over my morning coffee, each one a small victory in the war I was waging against my former life. Morrison Industries terminates partnership over ethics concerns. Senior partner under investigation for financial irregularities. Exclusive. Inside the scandal that rocked Morrison and Associates. My phone had been ringing nonstop since the story broke, but I'd let every call go to voicemail. Let Alex panic. Let him scramble to contain the damage while his carefully constructed world burned around him. Emily found me in my office that afternoon, her expression a mixture of concern and professional curiosity. The Morrison Industries situation is all over the news, she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. I assume you've seen the coverage? Hard to miss, I replied, not looking up from the contract I was reviewing. Though I can't say I'm surprised. The documentation was quite compelling. Olivia. Emily's voice carried the weight of someone who'd been practicing law for 3 decades. I need to ask you directly, are you concerned about potential retaliation? Alex Evans must know you were involved in Morrison's decision. I finally looked up, meeting her gaze with the steady confidence of someone who'd planned for every contingency. Let him come. I provided factual information to a client. If Alex has a problem with that, he's welcome to take it up with the State Bar. And personally, this must be complicated for you. Personally, I'm discovering that justice and vindication taste remarkably similar. I closed the contract file and leaned back in my chair. Alex Evans built his reputation on work he didn't do and credit he didn't earn. If he's facing consequences for that, it's long overdue. Emily studied me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. You've changed, Olivia. Since you came back, you're more focused, harder. I prefer to think of it as having learned to value myself appropriately. I stood up, gathering my things. Speaking of which, I have the Hartwell acquisition to finish. Was there anything else? Just be careful. Men like Alex Evans don't accept defeat gracefully. As if summoned by Emily's warning, my phone buzzed with yet another call from Alex. This time I answered. You've been avoiding me, he said without preamble, his voice rough with exhaustion and barely controlled fury. I've been working. You remember work, don't you? That thing I used to help you with before you decided I wasn't worth keeping around. Don't. Just don't. I could hear traffic in the background, the distant sound of honking horns and city chaos. We need to meet, face to face. This has gone far enough, has it? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like it's just getting started. Olivia, please. The words seemed to cost him something to say. Whatever you think I did, whatever I think you did. The laugh that escaped me was sharp enough to cut. Alex, you left me for my best friend and destroyed 10 years of my life in a text message. There's no think about it. You're destroying everything. My career, my reputation, my relationship with Clara. Your relationship with Clara is your problem, not mine. Though I have to ask, if it's so strong, why are you so worried about a little external pressure? The silence stretched between us, heavy with everything he couldn't say. Finally, he spoke again, his voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. What do you want, Liv? What will it take for you to stop? The question I'd been waiting for. The moment when the powerful Alex Evans, the man who'd discarded me like yesterday's newspaper, finally understood that he was no longer in control of the narrative. "I want you to feel what I felt," I said quietly. "I want you to know what it's like to have your life dismantled by someone you underestimated. I want you to understand that actions have consequences, and that some betrayals echo longer than you ever imagined they could. I never meant to hurt you this way, but you did. And more importantly, you chose to hurt me this way. You chose Clara over me, status over love, convenience over commitment. You made those choices, Alex. Now you get to live with them. The wedding is in 10 days. His voice cracked slightly. "Clara's been planning this for months. If something happens, then I suppose you'll have to hope your relationship is strong enough to survive a little adversity." I paused, savoring the moment. Though statistically speaking, marriages that begin under stress have significantly higher failure rates. "Just something to consider. You're not the woman I fell in love with," he said, desperation bleeding through his careful control. "No," I agreed. "I'm not." That woman was naive enough to believe that love was enough, that loyalty mattered, that the man she'd given her heart to would treat it with care. That woman is gone, Alex. You killed her. Olivia, I ended the call and immediately blocked his number. Let him find other ways to reach me if he was truly desperate. Let him exhaust every option, every connection, every favor he was owed in his increasingly futile attempts to stop the inevitable. Because the truth was, I didn't need to actively sabotage their wedding anymore. The momentum I'd created was self-sustaining now, feeding on their own paranoia and insecurities. Alex's professional scandal had created exactly the kind of crisis that would test their relationship's foundations, and from what I could observe, those foundations were proving to be remarkably fragile. I spent the rest of the evening in my apartment, reviewing the intelligence I'd gathered on their wedding preparations, the vendor contracts, the guest lists, the intricate timeline that Clara had crafted with the precision of a military operation. All of it dependent on trust, on shared vision, on the belief that their love could weather any storm. They were about to discover how wrong they were. My laptop chimed with a new email, and I smiled when I saw the sender, Charlotte Jensen from the Meridian Estate. "Miss Cooper," it read, "I wanted to give you advance notice that we may be activating your priority booking sooner than anticipated. The November 15th event has encountered some complications. I'll be in touch within the next 48 hours with final confirmation. Please ensure you're prepared to move forward immediately upon notification." I typed back, "I'm ready when you are." And I was more ready than I'd ever been for anything in my life. Ready to watch their perfect fairy tale crumble into dust. Ready to see Clara's social climbing ambitions collapse under the weight of their own contradictions. Ready to witness Alex's belated realization that some choices echo far longer than the moment they're made. Most importantly, I was ready to step fully into the life I was building for myself, a life where my worth wasn't determined by someone else's desires, where my dreams weren't sacrificed on the altar of someone else's ambitions, where my future belonged entirely to me. 10 days until their wedding. 10 days until the culmination of months of careful planning and strategic positioning. 10 days until Clara Hudson and Alex Evans learned what it truly meant to underestimate Olivia Cooper. I raised my wine glass to my reflection in the darkened window, toasting the woman I'd become and the reckoning that was finally at hand. After all, they'd taught me that sometimes the most beautiful revenge was simply allowing people to reap exactly what they'd sown. The call from Charlotte Jensen came at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 week before Alex and Clara's wedding date. I'd been awake for an hour already, sitting in my kitchen with a cup of coffee and the morning news, watching the financial markets react to the ongoing Morrison Associates scandal. Alex's firm had lost 3 major clients overnight, their stock price plummeting as investors fled from the ethical contamination. "Miss Cooper," Charlotte's voice carried the brisk efficiency of someone accustomed to managing crises. "I'm calling to inform you that your priority booking has been activated. The November 15th event has been officially canceled as of this morning." I set down my coffee cup with deliberate care, my pulse quickening despite my outward calm. "I see. May I ask what prompted the cancellation?" "Financial irregularities with the client's guarantor. It appears Mr. Evans' firm is facing significant liquidity issues following recent developments. Their corporate account was frozen pending investigation, and they're unable to meet their contractual obligations. The irony was perfect, so perfect I almost wondered if the universe itself was conspiring to deliver justice. Alex's professional downfall hadn't just destroyed his reputation. It had eliminated his ability to pay for the wedding that was supposed to cement his social ascension. How much notice does this give us for preparation? I asked, already mentally reviewing the corporate retreat details I'd fabricated. 71 hours. It's cutting things close, but we've managed more challenging timelines. I'll need your final headcount and catering preferences by noon today, and your event coordinator will need to be on site by Thursday morning. That won't be a problem. I paused, then asked the question that would determine how much I could savor this moment. Have you informed the original clients of the cancellation? Mr. Evans was notified 30 minutes ago. Miss Hudson, well, I understand she took the news rather dramatically. I could only imagine. Clara's perfect fairy tale wedding, the event she'd planned as her debut into high society, destroyed by the very scandal she'd dismissed as irrelevant to their relationship. The poetic justice was almost too beautiful to believe. I appreciate your professionalism in handling this situation, Charlotte. My team will be in touch with final details within the hour. After ending the call, I sat in the gathering morning light, processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. 7 months of careful planning, strategic positioning, and patient execution had culminated in this moment. Clara and Alex's wedding wasn't just canceled, it was obliterated, taking with it their carefully constructed narrative of destined love and inevitable success. My phone buzzed with the first of what would undoubtedly be many desperate messages. Clara's name appeared on the screen, followed by a text that radiated panic. Call me, please. Everything is falling apart. I deleted the message without responding. Let her panic. Let her scramble to find an alternative venue with 6 days' notice. Let her explain to 200 guests why the wedding of the year had suddenly become the cancellation of the decade. But first, I had a corporate retreat to finalize. The next several hours passed in a blur of coordinated deception that would have impressed a seasoned con artist. I called Maggie, who had agreed to play the role of my assistant for this operation, and we spent the morning creating an elaborate fiction about the tech startup retreat that would supposedly occupy the Meridian estate on November 15th. Quantum Dynamics Solutions, Maggie said, reading from the script we'd prepared. A blockchain AI company focused on sustainable cryptocurrency mining. The CEO is notoriously private, hence the need for absolute discretion. Perfect. And our guest list? 50 tech executives, all with names generic enough to be believable but specific enough to sound real. I've created LinkedIn profiles, corporate bios, even fake social media accounts dating back to years. The thoroughness of our deception was probably overkill, but I'd learned that success lay in the details. When Charlotte's staff researched our fictional company, they'd find a comprehensive digital footprint that would satisfy even the most suspicious investigator. By noon, I'd submitted all the required paperwork to the Meridian estate, along with the final payment that represented nearly everything I'd saved over 10 years of careful financial planning. The money that was supposed to buy Alex and Mia House would instead purchase the destruction of his new life. The transaction felt like the closing of a circle, the final transformation of my old dreams into the foundation of my new reality. My afternoon was interrupted by an unexpected visitor. Emily knocked on my office door at 3 p.m., her expression unreadable. Olivia, there's someone here to see you. Alex Evans is in the lobby. The words sent a jolt of adrenaline through my system, but I kept my voice level. Tell him I'm in a meeting. I did. He says he'll wait. Emily's eyes narrowed with concern. He looks desperate and angry. Are you sure you're safe? I considered the question seriously. The Alex I'd known for 10 years had never been violent, but that man had also never faced professional ruin and public humiliation. Desperation could make people unpredictable. Call security and have them stand by, but let him come up. It's time we finished this conversation. Alex entered my office 5 minutes later, and I barely recognized the man who walked through my door. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, his designer suit wrinkled as if he'd slept in it. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his hands shook with barely controlled emotion. You did this, he said without preamble, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. The venue, the scandal, everything. This is your revenge. Revenge? I leaned back in my chair, studying him with clinical detachment. Alex, I'm a lawyer working on behalf of my clients. If providing factual information about business practices constitutes revenge, then perhaps you should examine why that information was so damaging. Don't. He slammed his hand on my desk, making my coffee cup rattle. Don't you dare pretend this isn't personal. You've systematically destroyed everything I've built. I've done nothing but tell the truth. If that truth happened to reveal that your professional success was built on borrowed expertise and questionable ethics, that's not my fault. The venue cancellation happened hours after Morrison pulled out. That's not a coincidence. I shrugged, maintaining my facade of professional indifference. Perhaps your business practices finally caught up with you. I understand financial irregularities can create all sorts of complications. Alex's composure finally cracked completely. Clara is devastated. She's spent months planning this wedding, and now, do you have any idea what this is doing to her? I imagine it's giving her a glimpse of what I felt when she betrayed our friendship for a man who discards people when they're no longer useful. I stood up, moving to the window that overlooked the city. Though I suppose she's learning that lesson firsthand now. What do you want? The question came out as a broken whisper. Money? Public apology? Tell me what it will take to stop this. I turned to face him, seeing not the confident partner who'd left me 7 months ago, but a desperate man finally understanding the consequences of his choices. What I want, Alex, is for you to feel exactly what I felt. I want you to know what it's like to have your life dismantled by someone you underestimated. I want you to understand that some betrayals create consequences that echo far longer than the moment they occur. We loved each other once, he said, his voice breaking. Doesn't that count for anything? Once, past tense. I moved closer, close enough to see the fear in his eyes. The woman who loved you forgave your ambition, your selfishness, your gradual transformation into someone who valued status over substance. She made excuses for you, supported your dreams, sacrificed her own aspirations to advance yours. And you repaid that love by discarding her the moment someone better came along. I never meant you meant exactly what you did. You calculated the cost of betraying me and decided it was worth paying. I returned to my desk, sitting down with the authority of someone firmly in control. Now you're learning that betrayal is a transaction that can flow both ways. Alex stared at me for a long moment, his expression cycling through anger, desperation, and something that might have been recognition. You're not the woman I knew. No, I'm not. That woman was naive enough to believe that love was enough, that loyalty mattered, that good people deserved good things. This woman understands that the only person you can truly count on is yourself, and that sometimes justice requires taking an active role in ensuring consequences are delivered. Clara doesn't deserve this. She made a mistake. But Clara made a choice, just like you made a choice, just like I'm making choices now. I opened my laptop, dismissing him with the gesture. Your wedding is in 6 days, Alex. I suggest you start making calls to find a new venue. I hear the community center has lovely fluorescent lighting. He stood there for another moment, his hands clenched into fists, his face cycling through expressions of rage and helplessness. For a second, I thought he might try to physically intimidate me, but whatever fight he had left seemed to drain out of him all at once. This isn't over, he said finally. Yes, I replied, without looking up from my screen. It is. After he left, I sat in the silence of my office, feeling the weight of what I'd accomplished settle into my bones like satisfaction made manifest. The desperate man who'd just walked out bore no resemblance to the confident charmer who'd once convinced me to reshape my life around his ambitions. I'd broken him, systematically, strategically, completely, and I felt absolutely nothing. That evening, I drove past Claire's apartment building, curiosity compelling me to witness the aftermath of the day's revelations. Through her third-floor windows, I could see figures moving frantically, Clara and what looked like her mother, both gesticulating wildly as they spoke on phones, presumably calling every venue in the city in a desperate search for alternatives. The lights stayed on until nearly midnight, a beacon of panic in the urban darkness. I imagined the conversations, the escalating desperation as each call yielded the same result. No availability, no options, no fairy tale ending. My phone buzzed with another text from Clara. Liv, please. I know you probably hate me, but we were friends once. Don't let this destroy everything. I stared at the message for a long time, remembering the woman who'd held my hair back when I was sick, who'd listened to me practice wedding vows for a ceremony that would never happen, who'd promised to be my maid of honor someday. Then I remembered. The cold satisfaction in her voice when she'd called to tell me about her engagement, the casual cruelty with which she'd mentioned choosing the Meridian estate for their reception. I deleted the message and blocked her number. Some friendships, once broken, couldn't be repaired. Some betrayals created chasms too wide to bridge. And some people discovered too late that their actions had consequences they'd never considered. Clara Hudson was about to learn all three lessons simultaneously. November 15th dawned gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that felt like the city itself was conspiring against fairy tale endings. I woke early, not from anxiety but from anticipation, the way children wake on Christmas morning. Today was the day Clara and Alex would have been married, would have sealed their betrayal with vows and champagne and the approval of high society. Instead, they'd be experiencing the unique humiliation of explaining to 200 guests why their perfect wedding had become an impossibility. I dressed carefully for the day's events, choosing a navy silk dress that spoke of confidence and success. Not because I planned to make any public appearances, but because armor takes many forms, and today called for the kind that announced I was no longer a victim of other people's choices. The morning news provided the first delicious irony of the day. Channel 7's social correspondent, a blonde woman with the predatory smile of someone who lived for other people's misfortunes, delivered her report with barely concealed glee. What was supposed to be the wedding of the year has instead become the scandal of the season. The Hudson Evans wedding, scheduled for today at the prestigious Meridian estate, was abruptly canceled earlier this week due to what sources describe as insurmountable financial and logistical complications. The story cut to file footage of Clara at charity galas, Alex at business functions, the two of them posing at society events with the kind of practiced elegance that suggested they'd been born to this life. The irony wasn't lost on me that their public success had provided the very ammunition that would document their downfall. The cancellation comes amid ongoing investigations into Morrison and Associates, where Mr. Evans serves as senior partner. The firm has faced allegations of financial irregularities and questionable business practices, leading to the loss of several major clients and significant financial difficulties. My coffee tasted better than usual as I watched Clara's carefully constructed public image crumble in real time. The social media screenshots displayed on screen showed her Instagram posts from the past week, increasingly desperate attempts to maintain the facade that everything was proceeding according to plan, followed by a sudden silence that spoke volumes about her mental state. At 10 a.m., my phone rang. Maggie's name appeared on the screen. "Are you watching the news?" she asked without preamble. Channel 7 just did a feature story. I should probably feel guilty about how much I'm enjoying this. Probably. But do you? I considered the question seriously. No, not even a little bit. Good. Because I'm calling with an update that's going to make you enjoy it even more. I drove past the Meridian estate this morning. There are news vans lined up outside, and I saw Clara's car in the parking lot. She's at the venue, apparently attempting some kind of last-minute negotiation. My contact at Channel 7 says they're expecting a statement from the Hudson family around noon. The mental image of Clara making desperate pleas to Charlotte Jensen while news cameras waited outside was almost too perfect to believe. I'd always known Clara was stubborn, but I hadn't anticipated she'd be foolish enough to create additional public spectacle. "I'm going to drive by," I said, surprising myself with the decision. "I want to see this for myself." "Liv, are you sure that's wise? If someone recognizes you, let them. I'm not hiding anymore." And I wasn't. The woman who'd skulked in shadows and absorbed blame for other people's failures was gone. This version of me owned her choices and their consequences. The drive to the Meridian estate took 20 minutes through city traffic that seemed unusually heavy for a Saturday morning. As I approached the familiar limestone facade, I could see the media circus Maggie had described: 3 news vans, a cluster of reporters, and what appeared to be several dozen curious onlookers drawn by the spectacle of a high society meltdown. I parked across the street, far enough away to avoid immediate recognition but close enough to observe the drama unfolding. Through the estate's tall windows, I could see figures moving in what appeared to be heated conversation. Clara's distinctive blonde hair, Charlotte Jensen's silver chignon, and what looked like several other people in expensive suits. The Hudson Family Damage Control Team, no doubt. At 11:47 a.m., the front doors of the estate opened, and Clara emerged flanked by her parents and what was obviously a publicist. Even from a distance, I could see that she'd been crying, her usual perfect composure replaced by the puffy-eyed devastation of someone whose world had collapsed in public view. She approached the cluster of microphones that had been set up on the estate's front steps, her mother's hand steady on her elbow in a gesture that spoke of both support and control. When she began to speak, her voice carried clearly across the street, amplified by the news crew's equipment. "I want to thank everyone for their concern and support during this difficult time," she began, her voice shaking despite obvious attempts at control. "Due to circumstances beyond our control, Alex and I have made the difficult decision to postpone our wedding." Postpone, not cancel. Even in defeat, Clara couldn't bring herself to acknowledge the finality of what had occurred. The recent challenges facing Alex's business have created logistical complications that we felt were incompatible with the celebration we'd envisioned. We ask for privacy as we navigate this situation and look forward to sharing our joy with family and friends at an appropriate time in the future. The questions came immediately, a barrage of inquiries about the financial scandal, the venue, cancellation, the future of their relationship. Clara fielded them with the mechanical precision of someone who'd been coached extensively, providing non-answers that revealed nothing while attempting to maintain some shred of dignity. But I could see the truth in her posture, in the way her hands trembled as she gripped the podium, in the glances she kept casting toward the estate's windows as if hoping for some miracle that would restore her fairy tale ending. She was broken, completely, thoroughly broken, and Alex was nowhere to be seen. The absence spoke volumes about the state of their relationship, about his willingness to let Clara face the public humiliation alone while he preserved what remained of his own reputation. The man who'd promised to love and cherish her was content to let her absorb the full impact of their mutual downfall. I should have felt satisfaction watching Clara's public dismantling, should have experienced the vindication I'd been working toward for 7 months. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Pity, not for the choices she'd made or the consequences she was facing, but for the realization that she'd traded our genuine friendship for a relationship with a man who would abandon her the moment circumstances became inconvenient. She'd calculated the cost of betraying me and decided it was worth paying, only to discover that Alex's loyalty was even more conditional than she'd imagined. As the press conference concluded and Clara was hustled away by her family's security team, I sat in my car watching the news crews pack up their equipment, processing the strange emptiness I felt. For months, I'd imagined this moment would bring closure, would provide the satisfaction of justice delivered and scores settled. Instead, I felt like someone who'd climbed a mountain only to discover the view from the summit was less spectacular than the journey itself. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I know this was you, and I know you're probably here watching. I hope you're happy." Alex, still fighting, still trying to maintain some illusion of control even as his world crumbled around him. I typed back, "I am, but probably not for the reasons you think." Because the truth was, my happiness didn't come from Clara's tears or Alex's desperation or the spectacular failure of their wedding plans. It came from the realization that I'd reclaimed my life, my agency, my power to shape my own destiny. The woman who'd been discarded 7 months ago would have spent today crying into a bottle of wine, mourning the loss of the future she'd planned with Alex. This woman had spent the morning watching the consequences of other people's choices play out exactly as they deserved, while planning her own future that belonged entirely to her. I started my car and drove away from the Meridian estate, leaving behind the wreckage of Clara and Alex's perfect day. Tomorrow, I'd begin the next phase of my life, the phase where my dreams weren't sacrificed for someone else's ambitions, where my worth wasn't determined by someone else's desires, where my happiness wasn't contingent on someone else's choices. Behind me, the limestone facade of the estate grew smaller in my rearview mirror, taking with it the last vestiges of the woman I used to be. The Monday morning following what should have been Clara and Alex's wedding arrived with unseasonable sunshine, as if the universe itself was announcing that the storm had passed and brighter days lay ahead. I woke naturally at 6 a.m., no longer startled into consciousness by anxiety or dreams of confrontations, but simply ready to begin the next chapter of my carefully reconstructed life. My apartment, once a monument to shared memories and abandoned dreams, had been gradually transformed over the past weeks into something that belonged entirely to me. Alex's remaining possessions had been donated to charity, Clara's gifts relegated to storage, the engagement photos replaced with artwork I'd chosen myself. The space now reflected the woman I'd become rather than the woman I'd been expected to be. I dressed for the day with the same careful attention I'd once reserved for Alex's important meetings, but this time the armor was for my own battle. A charcoal blazer that spoke of professional competence, shoes that added 3 inches to my height and my confidence, jewelry that I'd bought with my own money to celebrate my own achievements. The office buzzed with the kind of energy that follows a major scandal, conversations stopping when I passed and resuming in whispers once I'd moved on. By now, everyone knew about my role in the Morrison Industries revelation, though the details remained strategically vague. I'd become something of a legend in the firm's folklore, the woman who'd brought down her ex-boyfriend's empire through nothing more than meticulous documentation of the truth. The entire industry is talking about you, Emily said, settling into the chair across from my desk with 2 cups of coffee and an expression of barely contained pride. James Morrison called this morning specifically to commend your professionalism in handling the situation. I simply provided factual information to a client, I replied, though I couldn't suppress the satisfaction that came with recognition. Earned rather than given. Factual information that prevented a major corporation from entering into a partnership with a potentially fraudulent firm. Emily's smile was sharp with approval. The legal community is taking notice, Olivia. You've demonstrated the kind of analytical skills and ethical backbone that firms like Morrison Industries value. She slid a thick folder across my desk, its cover bearing the letterhead of Patterson and Associates but marked with a significance that made my pulse quicken. Partnership track, Emily said simply. Full equity consideration, autonomy over your client portfolio, and a compensation package that reflects your actual value rather than your perceived potential. I opened the folder, scanning the terms that would have seemed impossible just months ago. The salary was double what I'd been making, the equity stake substantial enough to ensure financial independence, the client list filled with exactly the kind of high-profile acquisitions and corporate law that would establish my reputation industry-wide. This is significant, I said, understating the magnitude of what was being offered. You've earned it. The Morrison situation demonstrated something we'd suspected but hadn't seen fully. You're not just a talented associate. You're a strategic thinker with the kind of instincts that can reshape how we approach complex cases. Emily leaned forward, her expression serious. We want to build the firm's reputation around lawyers like you, Olivia. People who understand that success isn't just about winning cases, but about ensuring the right outcomes for the right reasons. I closed the folder, processing the implications of what was being offered. Financial security, professional recognition, the kind of career trajectory I'd put on hold to support Alex's ambitions. Everything I'd sacrificed for a relationship that had been built on the assumption that his success would somehow benefit us both. I accept, I said, the words carrying the weight of a decision that would reshape my entire future. Excellent. We'll want to announce your promotion officially next week, but I wanted you to know immediately. Emily stood, then paused at the door. Olivia, I hope you understand how remarkable this is. 6 months ago, you were taking a step back from your career to focus on personal relationships. Today, you're being offered one of the youngest partnerships in the firm's history. After Emily left, I sat in the silence of my office, contemplating the journey that had brought me to this moment. The woman who'd answered Alex's devastating text message 7 months ago would never have imagined that his betrayal would lead to the greatest professional opportunity of her life. My phone chimed with an email from Charlotte Jensen. Miss Cooper, I wanted to personally thank you for your professionalism throughout our recent collaboration. The corporate retreat was executed flawlessly, and we've received excellent feedback from your attendees. We'd welcome the opportunity to work with you again for future events. I smiled, remembering the elaborate fiction Maggie and I had constructed. The Quantum Dynamics Solutions retreat had been a masterpiece of creative storytelling, complete with hired actors playing tech executives and carefully scripted presentations about blockchain cryptocurrency mining. The Meridian Estate staff had been thoroughly convinced they'd hosted a legitimate corporate event, never suspecting they'd been participants in the most elaborate revenge plot in the venue's prestigious history. The cost had been enormous, nearly everything I'd saved over 10 years of careful financial planning. But the investment had yielded returns that couldn't be measured in dollars. My self-respect, my professional reputation, and the satisfaction of seeing justice delivered with surgical precision. My afternoon was interrupted by an unexpected email from an address I didn't recognize. Miss Cooper, this is Dr. Sarah Martinez from the Metropolitan Business Women's Association. We're hosting our annual conference next month, and we'd like to invite you to be our keynote speaker. The theme is Reclaiming Power, Professional Success After Personal Setback. Your recent experiences navigating career rebuilding have made you something of an inspiration in our community. I stared at the screen, processing the surreal notion that my personal catastrophe had somehow transformed into professional inspiration. The idea of sharing my story publicly, of standing before an audience and speaking about the journey from victim to victor, was both terrifying and exhilarating. But as I considered the invitation, I realized it represented something important. The opportunity to help other women understand that betrayal and abandonment weren't endings, but beginnings. That the moment someone else decided you weren't worth keeping could become the moment you discovered what you were truly worth. I typed my response. Dr. Martinez, I'd be honored to speak at your conference. Thank you for the opportunity. That evening, I celebrated my promotion alone in my apartment, opening a bottle of champagne I'd bought for myself and toasting the woman I'd become. As I stood at my window overlooking the city, I was conquering one victory at a time. My phone buzzed with a text from Maggie. Saw the news about your partnership. I'm proud of you, Liv. You took something devastating and turned it into something powerful. I texted back. We did this together. Thank you for standing by me when I couldn't stand by myself. What's next? Now that you've conquered the business world? I considered the question, looking out at the lights of the city where I'd been broken and rebuilt, where I'd learned that sometimes the most devastating losses could become the foundation for the greatest victories. Now I build the life I actually want, instead of the life I thought I was supposed to want. As I prepared for bed that night, I realized I'd stopped thinking about Alex and Clara entirely not from deliberate effort, but because they'd simply become irrelevant to my story. They were chapters I'd closed, problems I'd solved, people whose choices had inadvertently led me to discover my own strength. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, to shape my destiny according to my own vision, rather than someone else's expectations. I'd speak at conferences about reclaiming power, represent clients who valued expertise over accommodation, build a career that reflected my capabilities rather than my willingness to minimize myself for others' comfort. The woman who'd been discarded 7 months ago was truly gone now, replaced by someone harder, smarter, more dangerous in all the ways that mattered. Someone who understood that love without respect was worthless, that loyalty without reciprocity was weakness, and that sometimes the greatest gift someone could give you was showing you exactly who they really were. Clara and Alex had taught me that people's true character emerged under pressure, that pretty words meant nothing without consistent actions, and that some betrayals were actually liberations in disguise. For that education, despite everything they'd cost me, I was genuinely grateful. After all, it's not everyone who gets the chance to discover they're stronger than they ever imagined, more capable than they ever dreamed, and more deserving of success than they ever dared to believe. Some lessons, it turned out, were worth every tear they cost to learn. 6 months after what should have been Clara and Alex's wedding day, I stood backstage at the Metropolitan Convention Center, adjusting the microphone clip to my lapel and reviewing my notes one final time. The keynote speech I was about to deliver had been months in the making, not just in preparation, but in the living of every word I planned to say. Through the gap in the curtains, I could see the auditorium filling with professional women from across the industry, lawyers, executives, entrepreneurs, consultants, all gathered for the Metropolitan Business Women's Association's annual conference. The theme, Reclaiming Power, Professional Success After Personal Setback, felt like it had been written specifically for my journey, though I knew my story was just one variation on an ancient theme. 5 minutes, Miss Cooper, the stage manager said, her headset crackling with coordination chatter. The introduction is wrapping up now. I nodded, taking a deep breath and centering myself in the moment. The woman preparing to take this stage bore only superficial resemblance to the one who'd sat in her apartment 8 months ago, reading Alex's devastating text message through tears of shock and betrayal. That woman had defined herself through other people's needs, had measured her worth by her ability to support someone else's dreams, had believed that love meant sacrifice and loyalty meant silence. This woman understood that love without respect was worthless, that sacrifice without reciprocity was exploitation, and that sometimes the greatest act of loyalty was refusing to enable someone else's worst impulses. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Sarah Martinez's voice carried clearly through the sound system. Please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker, partner at Patterson and Associates and author of the upcoming book The Architecture of Reclamation, Miss Olivia Cooper. The applause that greeted me as I walked onto the stage was warm but expectant, the sound of an audience ready to be inspired but skeptical of another success story that might not translate to their own struggles. I'd felt the same way at conferences. Before my world imploded, politely interested but secretly doubting that anyone else's journey could provide a roadmap for my own challenges. Good morning, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the auditorium's excellent acoustics. 8 months ago, I received a text message that destroyed my life. My partner of 10 years was leaving me for my best friend. My career was on hold to support his ambitions. My savings account was funding our shared dreams. My identity was so intertwined with someone else's success that I'd forgotten what my own looked like. The room had gone completely silent, the kind of focused attention that indicated I'd immediately connected with my audience's own experiences of loss and rebuilding. I want to tell you that I handled this devastation with grace and wisdom, that I immediately recognized it as an opportunity for growth and transformation. But that would be a lie. A ripple of knowing laughter moved through the audience. I handled it exactly the way most of us handle betrayal, with shock, denial, rage, and enough wine to float a small ship. More laughter, warmer now, as the audience recognized the humanity in my admission. But somewhere between the third bottle of wine and the 5th day of not showering, I had a realization that changed everything. The man who'd just discarded me hadn't just stolen my future, he'd stolen my past. He'd taken credit for my strategies, my ideas, my work, and convinced me it was normal. He'd minimized my contributions while maximizing his own, and I'd collaborated in my own erasure. I paused, scanning the faces in the audience, seeing recognition in dozens of expressions. Women who'd supported partners' careers at the expense of their own. Women who'd provided uncredited expertise while someone else claimed the spotlight. Women who'd been taught that their value lay in their ability to elevate others rather than themselves. That realization was the beginning of what I call the architecture of reclamation, the systematic process of rebuilding not just your life, but your understanding of what your life can be. It starts with a simple but revolutionary premise. You are not responsible for other people's success, but you are responsible for your own. I clicked to my first slide, a simple diagram showing the difference between supportive partnership and exploitative enablement. The first step in reclamation is audit, not just financial audit, though that's important, but emotional and professional audit. What are you giving? What are you receiving? What dreams have you postponed? What ambitions have you minimized? What opportunities have you declined in service of someone else's vision? The audience was taking notes now, phones out to capture slides, the energy in the room shifting from polite attention to engaged participation. The second step is documentation. This isn't about building a case for revenge, it's about building a case for yourself. Document your contributions, your ideas, your expertise. Create a portfolio of your actual capabilities rather than your assumed limitations. You'd be surprised how much of what you've attributed to other people actually originated with you. I thought of the detailed records I'd compiled of Alex's business practices, the evidence that had ultimately led to his professional downfall. But more importantly, I thought of the parallel documentation I'd created of my own contributions, the strategies I'd developed, the presentations I'd crafted, the relationships I'd built. Evidence that had ultimately led to my promotion and recognition. The third step is strategic positioning. This is where most people get uncomfortable, because we've been taught that ambition is unseemly, that self-advocacy is selfish, that good women support others rather than themselves. I clicked to the next slide, showing career trajectory comparisons. But strategic positioning isn't about destroying others, it's about refusing to destroy yourself for their benefit. I Shared the story of the Morrison Industries deal, carefully edited to focus on professional rather than personal motivations. How I'd provided factual information to a client, how that information had revealed questionable practices, how the subsequent investigation had led to industry-wide recognition of my analytical skills and ethical standards. The fourth step is execution, not revenge, not retaliation, but the systematic implementation of your reclaimed power. This is where you stop asking permission to be excellent and start demanding recognition for excellence already achieved. The audience was fully engaged now, questions being typed into phones for the Q&A session, conversations already beginning in whispered exchanges between colleagues. The final step is reconstruction, building a life that reflects your actual values rather than someone else's expectations, pursuing opportunities that excite you rather than ones that seem appropriate, surrounding yourself with people who celebrate your success rather than those who benefit from your sacrifice. I paused, looking out at the sea of faces, seeing my own journey reflected in their expressions, the recognition, the anger, the hope, the determination. I won't lie to you, reclamation is expensive. It cost me nearly everything I'd saved. Over 10 years. It cost me relationships I'd thought were permanent. It cost me the comfortable illusion that being good and loyal and supportive would eventually be rewarded by others. My voice grew stronger, more confident, carrying the authority of someone who'd paid the price and discovered it was worth every penny. But it gave me something invaluable in return, the understanding that my worth doesn't depend on someone else's recognition, that my success doesn't require someone else's permission, and that my happiness isn't contingent on someone else's choices. The applause began before I'd finished the sentence, building to a standing ovation that lasted nearly 2 minutes. As I looked out at the audience of professional women on their feet, I saw not just approval but recognition, women who understood that my story was their story, that the principles of reclamation could be applied to any situation where power had been given away and needed to be reclaimed. During the Q&A session that followed, the questions revealed the depth of connection my story had created. Women shared their own experiences of minimized contributions and deferred dreams. Executives talked about the challenge of advocating for themselves in male-dominated industries. Entrepreneurs described the difficulty of valuing their own expertise appropriately. How do you know when reclamation is complete? Asked a woman in the third row, her voice carrying the weight of someone still in the middle of her own rebuilding process. I considered the question carefully, thinking about my own journey and when I'd first realized that Alex and Clara had become irrelevant to my story. Reclamation is complete when you stop defining yourself in relation to the people who discarded you, I said. When your success feels like your own achievement rather than proof of their mistake. When you can wish them well not because you're generous, but because their happiness or unhappiness no longer affects yours. And that, I realized as I said it, was exactly where I stood. Alex and Clara had become characters in a story I'd finished writing, people whose choices had inadvertently led me to discover my own strength but who no longer held any power over my present or future. After the conference ended and the last networking conversations concluded, I stood alone on the empty stage, looking out at the auditorium where I'd just shared the most honest account of my transformation I'd ever given. The woman who'd walked onto this stage was successful, confident, financially secure, professionally recognized, everything the woman reading Alex's text message 8 months ago had desperately wanted to become. But more than that, she was free. Free from the exhausting work of minimizing herself to make others comfortable. Free from the anxiety of depending on someone else's choices for her own happiness. Free from the limiting belief that her value lay in her ability to support others rather than in her own capabilities. My phone buzzed with a text from Maggie. Watch the live stream. I'm so proud of who you've become. I typed back. Thank you for helping me become her. As I gathered my materials and prepared to leave, I thought about the book I was writing, the consulting practice I was building, the life I was creating that belonged entirely to me. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to shape my destiny according to my own vision rather than someone else's expectations. The woman who'd been discarded had discovered she was worth keeping by herself, for herself, on her own terms. And that, I realized as I walked off the stage and into the rest of my reclaimed life, was the only validation that had ever truly mattered. The architecture of reclamation was complete, the foundation was solid, and the woman who'd built it was finally, completely, triumphantly free. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.